All right. Hello. Welcome back. This is episode 6 of the Exvangelical Bible Study. I'm Sarah and I'm here with Justin. And we are still in our journey through Genesis, which is a very, very long book. So last time we did chapter 19 and we spent the whole hour on chapter 19. And we are gonna go from there. So, hi, welcome, Justin.
Well, thank you for having me, Sarah. I'm certainly happy to be here. I know we had a little bit of a time stint between our last study and this study, so hopefully everything's still fresh. But I'm excited to dig into the Abraham and Sarah story. I feel like people know about Abraham and Sarah, but there's a lot of details in there that they might not know.
Yeah, and this was definitely, I know we talked about this earlier, but like also times where I feel like I'm reading the same story over and over again. Like that happens to me a lot in this.
Yeah, yeah, I can certainly understand why that is the case. We're definitely
Yep.
going to touch on that.
Yep. Well, to dive right in. So, for those of you, it's been a while. So, from last time, we just learned about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah and all of that. And so now the protagonist goes back to being Abraham. And so we're starting in chapter 20. And so Abraham moves south and he is settling and it says he settled in a place called Gerar. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay. And Abraham told people that his wife Sarah was his sister. So again, he's going somewhere. He's apparently worried about what's going to happen to him. And so he's putting his wife out as his sister so that potentially bad things can happen to her and not to him. So King Abimelech sent for her and had her brought to him at his palace. Again, this can't be for good things. I don't think you send for a woman like that for, you know, tea and cookies.
Yeah, not even the
Um,
good kings. Remember what King David did when he sent for Bathsheba? He didn't send to have lunch with her,
no, he sure didn't. Nope.
right?
And for whatever reason, Abraham's like, this is a good plan. Like, I've done this before. It turned out kind of okay in a weird way. And so
Mhm.
let's do this same thing again. And I will subject my wife to whatever this king is going to do to her and save myself.
Right. And here's the other thing too is this is you've already mentioned it. This is the second time we've seen this where the previous it was in Egypt and now they're going to the land of the Philistines, which is kind of anachronistic because the Philistines didn't exist yet. That's not until the beginning of the Iron Age. So, but anyways, we've got this situation where do you think Abraham would have learned from the first time just to say, hey, God's going to protect me?
Yeah. And even if he like God didn't even like take his side last time. He like swoops in to help the king, like, "Hey man, look, let me warn you about what's going on." Like, why wouldn't he think God would do that again? It's baffling.
And the other thing too is like Egypt was a little bit different. They went into Egypt to avoid the famine. It kind of seems like God prepped them beforehand to tell them to go. We get none of that in this chapter. Like they just end up there. We don't know why, but
Mhm.
like if they were so afraid of what would happen, why go there? You just go somewhere else.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Go back to Egypt.
Yeah, right, like, why would you go somewhere where you are concerned that these people will kill you or they will take your wife captive? Like, maybe don't do that? Like, maybe don't go there?
Yeah. I mean, I have a theory, and you and I have mentioned this quite a bit. We mentioned it last with Lot because the ancestors of Lot are the Ammonites and the Moabites. These are like cursed people group. And we talked about with Noah how the Canaanites were cursed because of what Ham did, right? So we have all these like descendants that like become cursed because of what their ancestors did. Like it's like the Genesis is trying to explain this is why we don't like these people. Well, we get the same
Mhm,
thing in
mhm.
Abraham and Sarah because they go into Egypt, and what happens in Egypt? They act wickedly. and then they go to the land of the Philistines. And what do the Philistines do? They act wickedly. So Genesis keeps building this case, like all these people that we don't like, this is why we don't like them. They're actually just terrible people. They've been terrible from the start.
Well, and that's certainly a theme throughout the Old Testament, is that whole groups of people are evil, and you can do anything you want to them and be justified because the entire group, 100% of them, are evil.
Right. Yep. And I guess that means the babies too, the children. The children aren't
Sure
innocent.
does. Yeah. Oh, I've heard the arguments, like, when we talk I know we'll get to a lot more, like, into Joshua and Judges and stuff, but, that it's okay to end the lives of children in these people groups because either well, it was actually like, God knew that those kids were gonna grow up to be evil, so it's okay to just end their lives now, or they were born into a really terrible situation, and so it's good that God took their lives because then they can just go right to heaven, which is astoundingly bad planning on God's part. Again,
Yeah.
not something an all-knowing God would do.
Which brings up a really good point because the apologetic that, like, well, God allowed these babies to be killed because he knew they were going to grow up and do bad stuff. Well, then why didn't he just kill all babies before they grew up and do bad stuff? Like, why are we drawing the line at these particular people? Why didn't he do it with Hitler? Why didn't he do it with Mussolini? Like, if God's in the business of protecting humanity by killing off wicked babies that will become wicked adults, just kill all of them. What are you doing here?
Yeah, and the idea that, like, well, he gave them 400 years to repent and they never did. Did that baby have 400 years to repent? Because I don't think that baby did.
Right. Well, of course, God knew that the baby wouldn't repent.
All right. Well, let's just what are we doing? What are we doing here? This is all
Right.
a charade then.
It's all a charade. And the other thing too, get this, and you've probably encountered this a few times, but like, so this idea that God needs to kill these wicked babies before they become wicked adults, but then he's allowing Satan to run around and do his shit. Like, what are you, what? Like,
Doesn't
make
make
up
any
your mind. Like, God, do you want to kill the bad people or not? Because it seems like you're picking and choosing which ones you want to get rid of. It seems like you want some of them to exist.
Yeah, every time I've asked that question, why does God allow Satan to continue on? Why does God allow Satan to ever have any power ever? I've never gotten a good answer. And all of the answers are nice ways of saying, well, it's for the plot. Like it's they don't say it that way, but it amounts to, well, God's going to use it in the end for his glory. Like that
Right.
that means it's for the plot. Like, that's what
Right.
that is.
Yeah, because God's a narcissist, right? So if God does all this horrific stuff just to glorify himself, it's called narcissism. If we said that about any other individual other than the God of the Bible, you'd say that that was horrific. Like if we were talking about one of the Greek gods, you'd be like, "Oh, that Greek god
Right.
sounds horrific." But when we talk about the Bible God, there's endless excuses.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
But
let's dive back in.
yeah, let's get in.
Like, keep us on track. Okay, so, Abraham told people that his wife Sarah was his sister, so King Abimelech's like, "Great, I'll take her." But then God comes to Abimelech, and again, this is so great. Um, so again, for those listening, I'm reading my old Bible, which is the New Living Translation, and sometimes it's just delightful. So my verse 3 says, "But one night God came to Abimelech in a dream and said, 'You are a dead man, for that woman you took is married.'" Just God giving it to him straight.
Yeah, I
So
mean, that's basically what he said. Like in the original Hebrew text, he says you're a dead man, which is really a fun idiom that gets translated well in your Bible.
And to clarify, is God saying that if you sleep with this woman, I, God, will kill you? Or is he saying that somehow something bad will happen to you in another way?
That was my interpretation of the passage is God is saying, listen, if you continue on this path, you're about to be next. You're going to be taken off the menu. So
By
that
God.
Yeah, by God, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Which makes the whole thing even more strange because as we keep reading, it kind of feels like God was already in control in the beginning of the story. Like he was the one that was pulling the strings.
Yeah. Yeah. One of those times where God is acting like he is bound by some other laws, that like his actions are guided by something greater than himself. Like, well, if you actually go through with this, I'll have to kill you. So I'm going to warn you so that I don't have to do that later. Um
Right. Which is
yeah.
weird because in verse 6, it says, it says, God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her." Okay, well, that's interesting. Like, well, why'd you let her get taken? Like, if you're the one controlling the whole, why didn't you just prevent them from the very beginning?
Yeah, why not just be like, "Hey, Abraham, this is a bad idea. Don't do it."
And the weird thing
Uh,
for me in verse 6 is that, and let me put it back on the screen. In verse 6, it says, "Then God said to him in a dream, 'Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart,'" which is a really interesting thing because God is kind of admitting there that even though what he was doing to Sarah was wrong because she was married, there's no condemnation for kidnapping women, presumably who aren't married.
Sure. I mean, yeah, that's it seems to be kind of expected from everyone in the story.
Yeah. Am I reading that wrong when it says that God himself says of Abimelech that, you did this thing, essentially in innocence, in with your integrity,
Yeah.
meaning had she not been married, it would have been perfectly integral to kidnap her.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. My New Living Translation, when it talks about him taking her, it just says that he sent for her and had her brought to him, which doesn't sound super consensual. Um,
No, not so much.
but I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. I think the idea that like sexual purity is something in the Bible, a little in the Bible, that if if it matters at all, it only matters for women. It doesn't matter for men, and men are only condemned for certain sexual acts if they are violating another man's property, not violating the woman. And so, yeah, it looks like, well, if she's not married, she's fair game because no one has purchased her yet. And so, sure, have at it.
Right, yeah, it's at best, I guess you would say it's like a minor infraction.
Yeah, God did not seem upset that he took her, only that she was married.
That seemed to be the problem. Yeah. It's hard to stomach the idea that, like, we expect this from ancient, men, but like, you shouldn't expect it from a deity. Um,
Right.
it's like there's so many thousands of opportunities in the Bible where the deity could have stepped in and said, "No, actually, you shouldn't behave this way towards women," but he just never does.
Yeah. I mean, for a deity that is supposed to be perfectly just, he seems completely subject to the culture that he was written in.
Yeah, yeah. He sounds a lot like what you would expect if somebody was making up a god from that time period.
Indeed. Yeah, he functions exactly with the expected morals of the time. Almost
Yeah,
like morals are subjective.
shocker.
We're both shocked.
Maybe even chagrined. We'll see.
Well, and even in that passage, I mean, speaking of justice, it says, okay, so return her to her husband and then I'll
Right,
let you live. But if you don't, you can be sure that you and your entire household will die.
right.
Um, that's verse 7. Yeah, in verse 7.
Yeah.
And I think it's another example of like Old Testament God is totally fine punishing excess people, like punishing
Yeah.
people who did not commit the crime. They're just kind of collateral damage, and it just seems to be sort of okay.
Right. And like, because what did the household do? Like theoretically, we could
Uh-huh.
say that maybe they participated in the events, but it doesn't seem like the proper usage of household. Usually the usage of household refers to lots of people under the control of like the household leader, not
Mhm.
just those who may have been complicit. Um and
Yeah.
it's weird too because like just prior to that, we're hearing again that God is kind of the one pulling the strings. So, like, I don't know, it seems weird that if God's pulling the strings, he would have tugged on the one that resulted in a household of people possibly dying.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think another example too of God sort of acting as if God is ruled by some outside force, and that like, "Hey, I know you're innocent, but like if you don't return her, I have to kill you and your whole household. Like, sorry about that. I don't have a choice," which is weird.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because I mean, there's no reason. Let's imagine that Abimelech did something horrible. Let's say that he carried through with the thing he wasn't supposed to do. It still doesn't warrant like anybody in his household suffering for it. Like God could have just punished the one person guilty. That's like,
Mhm.
I guess that's entailed in being all powerful. You have no limitations.
Yeah, yeah, but he seems ruled by some other governing force that, forces his hand to do certain things.
Yeah, actually, we're gonna see more of that when we continue reading this chapter. There's a really weird incident where it seems like God isn't going to do something unless Abraham does it for him. It's a weird.
Mm,
We'll capture
okay.
that in the yeah when we get to it. I'm sure once you read it, you'll be like, "What the heck is going on here?"
Okay. Well, so Abimelech's like, "Well, can I swear on this? I don't know
Yeah, you
the."
can swear all you want, yeah,
Oh, okay.
or
Well,
heathens.
damn, I don't want I don't want I don't want everyone to die, so Abimelech gets up, he calls his servants, and then he's mad at Abraham. Reasonably so, right?
Hmm.
Abraham tricked him in this way. "What have you done? Why are you treating me like this? And why make me and my kingdom guilty of this great sin?" Now the whole kingdom is guilty. And this is like, what a burn here. Abraham says, "Well, I figured this to be a godless place." Like, okay, Abraham. I thought you were terrible people. I don't know.
I mean, that's an honest response, is it not?
True. Yes. Yes.
The what so, I mean, there's so much happening just in that section, because, like, wh why would we expect I guess because this is the way the world worked, right? We would expect that if a king does something wrong, that all of his subjects, can be imputed guilt, but this seems to be, like, you shouldn't expect this from a god. But
Right.
the Bible God is like that all the time. In Leviticus, it says if a priest, a Levite commits a sin, he has to give a particular guilt offering because the sin would be guilt on the whole congregation of Israel. Like what? What?
Mm,
If a priest sins, it doesn't mean the whole congregation is guilty. That's ridiculous. And then
right.
you remember the story of David when he took the census, which is weird because like there's
Oh,
no
yeah.
doesn't seem to be much of a law against it, but, David's people, 70,000 Israelites get slaughtered by the angel of the Lord for David's sin,
Yeah.
which is just a really weird turnabout, like, why does David's sin result in the guilt of all the people? But we have so many instances where God's like, "I'm really upset with this king, therefore, I'm gonna wipe out all of their people groups too." Um, uh, this you would expect in ancient tribal warfare, but you wouldn't
Mm.
expect it from a deity that's like the highest moral arbiter that ever existed.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a the word I'm looking for? It's such a left turn from the way Christianity is practiced today, in which, especially in the US, it is such an individualized religion. Like, you as an individual are special, and God designed you, and you individually have a relationship with God, and your salvation is individual. And that's just not what we're seeing here. Like, this God in the Old Testament, he is definitely judging whole groups of people. There's exceptions to that for sure, but frequently an entire people group gets judged, and they get praised and punished as a whole people group.
Yeah. And Christians will be quick to point out, well, God doesn't do that anymore, right? And so they're kind of implicitly suggesting that, well, it's more preferable to have the system we have now than the system that they had prior. Like, they're implying that God got better somehow. But like, if God is all knowing, like, he shouldn't have to go from worse to better. Like, he shouldn't have to try stuff out. He should just start with the
Right.
best thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I've heard too, like, well, you don't understand like what people were like back then. Like, this is what he
Oh,
had
it's
to do.
it's
Like,
people.
so why wouldn't God just create people back then who could handle what he's doing now? Like, yeah, it's almost like instead of a beta version of God, it's like a beta version of humans. Like, okay, well, those humans back then, they could only handle laws and
Uh,
sacrifices, but us better humans now, we can handle grace and mercy.
yeah. Listen, Sarah, I don't want to put this on you, but I think you probably just coined a new hashtag, and there's a 100% chance I'm going to make a T-shirt tonight that says hashtag Beta God. Just saying, it's a thing that's going to happen. You can't stop it.
Okay. I'm sorry in advance to all the people I made mad.
Okay, I'll send you a free one.
Okay. Well, if I ever like hop on your live in person again, I'll wear
Okay.
it.
Oh boy. The funny thing is, and as we're reading this passage, like, you remember what God's fix for all this was at the end of it, right? After he kind of, we'll say, reprimands Abimelech.
Oh, that Abraham has to like pray for him and do a sacrifice?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Abraham's got to pray, which is, it's kind of an astounding thing. It
Yeah.
says to Sarah, he said, "Look, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your
Oh,
exoneration
whoa, wait, wait,
before."
wait. We have to talk about that.
I know. Sorry. Yeah,
Hang on.
I got ahead of myself. uh,
Wait, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead. I will bring us back to that.
well, I was just saying that it's weird because we were talking about like how God seems to be in control of everything. That, at the end of it, God's like, "Well, Moses, Abraham will pray for you, and then I'll forgive you." It's like, what? Like, why? Why is that part of the
You're
stipulation? Like, it
right.
doesn't make
Like,
any
you're talking to me
sense.
right now. Why can't you just forgive me right now? Like, God, and we're having a conversation.
Yeah, isn't it's so weird that like the forgiveness is contingent on Abraham doing the prayer. It says, "Now
Mm,
then, return this man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live." But what? Why? Why does? What if Abraham decided not to pray?
mhm.
Like, would he have just punished him anyways?
I mean, thematically with the text, I would say yes. That's that seems likely.
It seems that way. But let's imagine for a second that Abraham decided he wasn't going to pray. Does that mean Abraham's more powerful than God at that point? He's dictating God's will.
Well, I mean, what the answer there is right. I know what the answer is. Free will. He was giving Abraham the choice. Granted, he knew what choice Abraham was going to make when he said this to Abimelech, but it's neither here nor there.
And if God already knew, that Abraham would do it, which is why he said it. Well, then why would he make that a contingency? If he already knew how it was going to play out, why wouldn't he just say, "Well, I'll forgive you"? Like it doesn't.
Uh-huh. Well, and again,
Yeah,
it's like God is subject to these outside laws that God has to appease.
right.
Like I, God, cannot forgive anyone until these steps occur. I'd love to sidestep them, but I can't. I'm bound by these some sort of laws anyway, which is weird.
Yeah, and God already admitted in the dream that Abimelech he wasn't really guilty of anything. He says, "You did this in the integrity of your heart." So what's he being forgiven for?
I don't know. Yeah, agreed. It's really strange, and I don't know why God has to go through like a third party for any of this.
Yeah, because it seems like if anyone's guilty of anything here, it would be Abraham. Abraham's the one that caused this thing to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know
So
why God's not mad at Abraham.
yeah, Abimelech should have been praying for Abraham.
Yeah, that's true. I yeah, it doesn't make sense.
If
Well,
we've learned
in
anything about the Bible, it's that there are plot holes. There's going to be plot holes.
yeah, just a few, just a little one, little baby. Well, okay, so the next verses gets to what I wanted to ask about. So Abraham continues on when he's like in verse 11, I figured none of you cared about God. I'm sorry. And then he continues on to sort of like gaslight and justify what he did. Like, well, I mean, she kind of is my sister. What? And so in my version, it says, besides, she is my sister. We both have the same father through different mothers, and I married her. Let me tell you how many times I learned about that in Sunday school. Donut. 0. 0. I never it's like I've read this text. I don't know why I didn't see it before, or maybe I thought it was like I don't know. I was gonna try and make some excuse about seeing it spiritually somehow, but that really doesn't make sense with what the text says. So I don't know. I don't know how I missed it.
It's a funny text too because I think what happens is a lot of people forget it's there because this story parallels the story of them going to Egypt so well. And in
Right.
the Egypt story, we don't learn that they're actually half siblings. Only in this story do we learn about them being half siblings. So I think it just depends on which story stuck in your brain the most. Um, but the interesting thing is, let's imagine that whatever it is true that they are half siblings. Um, he still the goal of saying what he said was to deceive the king. Like his goal was to do deception.
Right. He's trying to justify lying.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. He's basically saying, I deceived you, but it's not technically a lie because, we are actually half siblings. But like, I don't know if lying is like if a lie depends wholly on technicalities. Like if your intent is to deceive somebody and you are withholding information to do the deception, I mean, that's what lying is it not? Am I crazy here?
Oh, yeah, let me tell you how much trouble I would have gotten in my household when I was a kid if I pulled something like this. Like,
Yes.
well, I mean, technically, I wasn't really lying because this is sort of true. My mom would have been like, "Go to your room." But nope.
My dad would have been, technically, I'm not spanking you right now. I'm just correcting you. But it still hurts. Oh boy.
Yeah, well, and then I guess maybe another instance of, like, uh us humans having a more evolved moral system. Like my at the time conservative Christian parents would have if I did this, they would think that was wrong. That my yeah,
Right.
exactly like you said, my intent was to deceive. And no, you're not getting off on this on a technicality.
Right. Which brings up a good point because like we see lots of people in the Bible, Abraham, even God, whose their intention is to do deception. And when they do it, we just be like, well, they had to do it for X, Y, and Z. Like, there's always a way to justify it, but it seems to me like this is a form of special pleading. Like, when you
Mm.
do it, it's always bad. You never have a good reason for it. When they do it, it's okay, and let me tell you why it's okay.
Yeah. I have had some form of that argument probably 20 times. Yes, I
Right.
agree.
Oh well.
Ah,
Now,
okay.
yeah, in verse 13 it says, "And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do to me at every place which we come. Say that he is my brother." And this kind of points to the incident in Egypt a little bit, where Abraham's essentially saying that, I'm wandering from my home because God caused
Mhm.
me to wander, right? But if God caused him to wander into King Abimelech's territory, why wouldn't God also just cause them to be protected?
Right. Well, and I mean, maybe that's some justification for why in the next couple chapters he's got to test his faith again.
There's always a test. All knowing beings need to test people.
Right? I mean, well, yeah, all of those. How many covenants did he make? There's like chapter 15, God's covenant with Abram. Chapter 17, God's covenant with Abram. Like he
Hmm.
has covenanted with you a whole bunch. And so I agree. I mean, Abraham should have had faith that God was going to take
Hmm.
care of him.
Right. And in like the next one or two chapters, we're going to see the doublet for the naming of Isaac. So previously in chapter 18, we hear about this idea of Sarah laughing, which seems to give
Hmm.
rise to why Isaac was named. But then later, after he's born, or when he's born, there seems to be a secondary story for why he was named Isaac that was resulted from laughing. And this goes back to what you've pointed out many times. It seems like a lot of these narratives, like they're being told multiple times, but with slightly different details. And I think this is one of the many reasons why universally, almost universally in Old Testament scholarship, like scholars generally agree that there were multiple sources that were stitched together. And this theory has been since the middle of the 1800s been like reigning supreme in Old Testament criticism. No one's debunked it yet. No one's come up with a better theory that has persuaded scholarship otherwise.
Well, yeah, it does help, you know, um, help this make sense. So yeah, it fits.
Yeah.
All right. So Abimelech takes sheep and oxen, gives them to Abraham, gives his wife Sarah back. Thanks. He says to look over my kingdom, and then Abimelech says, "Look, I'm giving your brother." It's in my Bible in quotes, which I just love. Like I feel like that's like I'm sensing the tone. 1,000 pieces of silver to compensate any embarrassment I might have caused you. Hold on. Abimelech pays Abraham to compensate for any embarrassment he may have caused Sarah.
Yeah. Well, obviously, an offense against a woman is an offense against her husband because she's property of the husband.
Yep.
Just like we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about the situation happening with Noah and Ham and the curse,
Oh,
on
yeah.
how the uncovering of a wife's nakedness is akin to uncovering the nakedness of her husband. Like the offense always is against like the position of authority. So like when you do something against a woman, you're technically doing it against her husband because she's more or less just a vassal of the husband. It's pretty sick that like women really just seem to be accessories.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
like children,
Nothing.
right?
Yeah. Children were property too. Like they were part of your wealth.
Yeah, seems like women, like, in the Bible are kinda, like, one step above children, like, they're between children and actual, adults, but they don't get treated like adults typically.
Mm.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. And the other thing too is, again in the story, they're trying to put blame on Abimelech for causing the whatever the shame or the embarrassment, but Abimelech didn't. I mean, according to the morals laid forth in the book, Abimelech didn't really do it. I mean, theoretically, Abraham caused it.
Abimelech did something wrong. He just didn't happen to
Yes.
do this thing that was wrong.
Well, yeah, the thing that we think he did wrong, God thinks is fine.
Fine. That's fine. Don't worry
In
about
fact,
that.
in Deuteronomy 20 and 21, God says you can do it. When you go to war against your enemies and God hands them over to you, you can take their women and children. And if you see a hot one among them, you can marry her. That's just part of the process for God.
Yeah. All right. I have nothing good to say about that.
Yeah.
Um Okay, now this last two verses I have questions.
Yes.
So it says, then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife. What is he healing Abimelech for? And the other women of the household so they could have children, for the Lord had stricken all the women with infertility as a warning to Abimelech for having taken Abraham's wife. Okay, first question. This all happens in like a couple days, right? So
It kind
how
of
did all
seems that way.
right, how would all the women even know that they had been stricken with infertility?
Right. So here's kind of what I'm gathering from this. And I had a lengthy discussion with someone on this once, and it seems to be that obviously the women wouldn't have known. So what's the point of this whole charade? What seems to be it maybe what God is attempting to do is to prevent people from getting pregnant, probably including Sarah herself, because of what was happening.
But
Um,
what? That doesn't make sense.
I know,
So, because Abimelech doesn't even sleep with Sarah. Like,
I know.
and why does God have to strike other women infertile just to protect Sarah? Like, does he only have certain abilities that, like, well, I want to do this, but I can only do it to all of you. I don't have the ability to just do this to one of you. Like,
Well, the way the story reads too is that they may have been there for a while because it says he healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. So it seems to be suggesting that there must have been a time period where they weren't bearing children. But I mean, the only way this could make sense is if Abimelech had a really big harem and was just used to wives giving birth all the time. But even if that were the
mm,
case, you don't know you can't witness when somebody conceives, but you can witness when they start showing, and you can witness when they give birth. And these signs are months apart from conception, right? Which means for anyone to even know that their wombs had been closed up, this event had to have taken over the course of a number of months.
yeah,
Um,
at minimum. I
and
mean,
it
I'm looking back at the beginning of the chapter, and it does say, like, but one night God came as if, which, I mean, opens the door to any length of time, really. So, I mean, I guess I was reading this as it was happening in a few days, but it doesn't actually say that it was just a few days. So,
right.
yeah.
That is the way it reads, and we find something similar to in First Samuel chapter 12 with the whole Bathsheba incident. It reads like it's all just happening right now, but in reality,
Mhm.
there is like 9 months of time passing in that one chapter. Because he takes Bathsheba, then he finds out that she's pregnant, and then he has to kill Uriah, and then within the same chapter, they bear the child that gets stricken dead after 7 days. So it's possible there's some length of time here, but I think
Yeah.
here's something really interesting that Christians overlook. Let's imagine for a second that the way you're reading this, or that the way we're surmising it could be a longer period of time. If God made it so that they weren't bearing children during this time period, then it must mean that they were miscarrying. Otherwise, those children that were already conceived when Abraham and Sarah showed up would have been born.
Does it strictly say, I mean, that seems like a stretch in that does it like it says
So
they
in
weren't
my
able to, like, get pregnant, but does that mean that every like, as soon as they arrived, pregnant women wouldn't have given birth?
So that might be, maybe we should look at both of our translations. Mine says when Abraham prayed to God, God healed Abimelech and also healed his wife and female slaves so that they bore children. I guess the question maybe I should ask is bearing children conceiving or giving birth? Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because in my translation says, "So they could have children." And so when we say
Oh.
have children, yeah, usually you're thinking the ability to conceive. Um,
Yeah,
so
so
it doesn't.
the verb that I've got here is not the verb to conceive in Hebrew. I've got yalid or yalad would be the standard form of it. Um, I've got yalidu, which means they could bear children or children. So the word for child is yelid in Hebrew, and
Okay.
to bring forth a child, you would say yalad. So I'm reading this the same way the NRSV reads it, which is that actual birthing process, birthing children, not bearing children. But I
Hmm,
don't know if it's
interesting.
quite as conclusive as that. I bet if I look up the history of this word, I might find a couple occasions where Yalad is used to refer to being pregnant or being with child. But
Mm,
all the instances I know of in Genesis uses this verb to refer to giving birth.
hmm, interesting.
So
Well, then, yeah, I mean, if he's saying they weren't allowed to give birth, then yeah, that would be a miscarriage.
that's what I'm thinking, right? Like if
Yeah.
they if he has a big harem, he probably did since he's just randomly taking women. If he has a big harem and one or two of them or a couple of them are pregnant when Sarah and Abraham show up, and it stands to reason either they were pregnant for 24 months or they miscarried,
Hmm,
right?
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I guess I would have I was picturing it like just no one else could get pregnant again, like, during that time, but yeah, I mean, that makes sense too.
I think um if you had I think that makes a better understanding of why this was like a good, not good, we'll say a powerful thing to use as like a punishment,
Mm,
because you don't really know when you're conceiving a child typically. It takes a while.
right.
But if you've got a large household of women that are constantly giving birth because they're just baby making machines back then, and then one day nobody's giving birth anymore and all the women are miscarrying, that would be a pretty striking thing to witness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that means God was already punishing his whole household for something Abimelech was innocent for, and that God knew that Abimelech was innocent for.
Yep, and he if he's all knowing, then he knew ahead of time that he was going to be innocent,
Okay.
and God caused him to be innocent because he intervened and prevented him from laying hands on Sarah.
Yep.
There's so much happening in this one chapter that is so like I get how these stories happen. Like someone puts a story together, somebody comes along later and they're like, "Well, we need to add this and band-aid that." And when they don't realize that their band-aid needs another band-aid because they made the story worse. So they put a band-aid. Before you know it, it's like this patchwork of nonsense. People trying to fix and correct the text, making it worse along the way, not better.
All right. Let's get to 21. We're actually going to do more than
Right.
one chapter.
We 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 are
Ah,
achievers this week.
I know. Okay, Isaac is born. So,
Right.
um my oh, it's interesting. My translation is a little different, slightly. But it just says the Lord did exactly what he had promised. And my old Christian self has underlined that. No.
Oh,
Sweet
God's
girl.
promises. Oh,
I
always
know.
true.
Oh. Um So, Sarah becomes pregnant, and they have Isaac, and um, and then he gets circumcised. Is 100 years old. Sure,
Makes
um,
sense. Yeah.
makes sense. And then in verse 6, Sarah declares, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. For who would have dreamed I would ever have a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. Is that the second like reference that you were talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that she's kind of using this to say that this is how he's going to get his name because I bore a child in old age.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be like a doublet from chapter 18.
What does doublet mean?
It's a story that just shows up twice. It's a repeat. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
But in
Yeah, because
chapter
for
18,
laughing,
oh, sorry.
sorry. But yeah, laughing seems to be a bad thing in chapter 18.
Exactly. Yes. In chapter 18, like she laughs at Yahweh and Yahweh,
Right.
like she gets called out and she's like, I didn't laugh. And he's like, the hell you didn't. I heard you laugh. But then we're like, oh, that's interesting. But then in chapter 21, she's laughing and it doesn't have such a negative connotation. And that seems to be the origin of the name.
Yeah, we're rewriting history a little bit to make ourselves look better.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
All
Oh
right.
boy.
So, now sorry, I'm skimming and reading at the same time. This we have poor Hagar again.
Oh, Hagar. I feel so
No.
bad for Hagar.
Ugh, this poor woman. So it says as time went by, Isaac grew, and they had a party, but then Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar, making fun of Isaac. And so
Mm.
she turns to Abraham and says, get rid of that servant and her son. He's not going to share the family inheritance with my son Isaac. I won't have it. I love this
So
translation. It's so much fun.
this is a really interesting point, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get into it, but my translation says Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian whom she had born to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac.
Oh,
Right. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
making fun of. Wait, now, okay, so can you look up the word? Like, what is it? Is it, I mean, because making fun of and playing with is so different.
Yeah, it actually really is different. And you know what? I had some notes on this I forgot to bring up, but there so the Hebrew text, there's two problems. One is depending on how you're reading Genesis, um either Isaac is much older, I'm sorry, much younger than Ishmael, or they're like really close in age. It's hard to differentiate how much time has passed. And there's a way to read it. Like when we get to when Hagar and Isaac or Hagar and Ishmael are cast out into the desert, it reads like he's a child still, like he's the same age as Isaac, just a year or two older. But if you do the actual ages of the children, they're clearly like 14 years apart. So
Mm.
um translators have found it difficult to translate what was actually happening here because depending on how you read it, he's much older or he's the same age. If he's the same age, then you might translate it as playing. Like he saw Isaac or Ishmael, playing with Isaac. If he's much older, you might translate it something as like jeering, or
Oh.
teasing or making fun of, right? But the actual word
Hmm.
that was, give me a second to run to the passage and see what the actual word was. I think we're in verse 9, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Because there seems to be, if I remember correctly, a lot of disagreement as to how to actually translate the word.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it paints such a different picture of Sarah. I mean, either way, what Sarah does is pretty crappy, but, you
Right.
know, but for just seeing them playing together or, like, if Ishmael's actually being mean to her son, it's very different.
So here is why I think the idea of mocking is probably not the best way to translate the word. I'm going to show you. Oh, you can't see it. You can't see that. I'm sorry. Let me redo my display here so you can see what's on my screen. Let me try this again. There we go. So
Oh, okay.
this word, zakak, is supposed to be a play on words with the name Isaac. It's related to the name Isaac. Yiskak is actually a conjugated form of zakak. And we've got a form here which is mizkak. And look at what, remember we talked about the triplet of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Rebecca having the women taken? Well, in the
Mhm.
last edition, when King Abimelech witnesses Isaac and Rebecca, listen at what it says Isaac was doing to Rebecca. In the translation, it says typically something like Isaac was caressing his wife when they were spied. The KJV says sporting, like playing around with, or having a like an intimate session of some nature, right? Um, but the same exact word in Genesis 21, so many translators have translated to mocking, which
Weird.
that's not a normal semantic range for the words. The only way you can get around that is if you think of it as like teasing, like light teasing, like maybe
Mhm.
when Isaac and Rebecca were there, like they were like teasing each other. They were having an
Yeah.
intimate time together. And then in Genesis 21, they were teasing. Isaac was teasing. Um, Ishmael was teasing Isaac. So
Okay, I mean,
like
I can
you could see it a little bit there. It's not entirely clear,
yeah.
but you could make that leap. Um, but it's really hard to know what in the world they were really trying to say there, because it's just not a widely used word. You know what I mean?
Well, in those other instances, I mean, it seems to be describing a either like sort of consensual, pleasurable event,
Right.
whatever it was. And so, yeah, if the word being used again, it seems like it wouldn't be this mean-spirited event because it was used in such a positive connotation in the other references.
Right. And like the actual root word, um, zakak, which gets translated as laughing for the name Isaac, the root word could refer to a little bit of teasing. You know what I mean? Like that's a possible range for it. But also it gets used to like in Exodus, when the golden calf incident happens, right?
Mhm.
Um, and the Israelites get up and they party and they get into all the revelry and the drinking and the dancing. It's described using the same verb. The Israelites got up and they partied together. It's literally the same word. It's just like it's a form of of like playing or making enjoyment together or sporting with each other.
Interesting. Yeah, my only other thought was like since it was in the other context used like in a sexual nature, was Sarah implying that, older Ishmael Ishmael was doing something inappropriate, like of a sexual nature to her son, and now she's mad about that. But if it's used just in that general party sense, it doesn't sound like that would be right either.
Right. And so the difficult thing is like the root word is fairly common. The problem is the way that it's conjugated in Genesis as a participle, that is not common. So the question is like, what are we doing with this particular conjugation? How do we deal with it? Now, it we're gonna get into this with a chapter, the age of Isaac. Maybe I'll have to go grab my old notes, but like if in fact Ishmael and Isaac aren't that far apart in age, then you could see why the story might suggest that they were playing together, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but we'll get into that. There's some big questions raised because there's two issues here. One, the text clearly shows that they're like 13 to 14 years apart. When it just gives their age, you can calculate it, you can figure it out. But the way the story reads from here on out is like they're very close in age, and Ishmael is still a
Mm,
little child.
right.
So
Yeah.
that kind of primes the scene. Let's get into it. Let's read the chapter here, and then it'll become more abundant that the age of Ishmael is not all that conclusive.
Okay. So Sarah says, get rid of him, and Abraham's upset about it. But God told Abraham, do not be upset about the boy and your servant wife. Do just as Sarah says, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. But I will make a nation of the descendants of Hagar's son because he is also your son. Okay, so that's kind of weird, but kind of helpful, I guess. But then Abraham gets up, gives them some food and some water, strapped to Hagar's shoulders, and just sends them into the wilderness.
Yes.
Okay. And she walked out into the wilderness of Beersheba, wandering aimlessly. When the water was gone, she left the boy in the shade of a bush and she went and sat down by herself and said, I don't want to watch the boy die, and burst into tears.
Yep.
What the fuck?
So this part of the story is where there's so much happening that we could spend a lot of time just on these couple verses. For one, um, when they rose early in the morning, it says, they took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar and putting it on her shoulder. Okay. Well, the it is neither the bread or the skin of water. The it
Oh,
in the Hebrew text is clearly the child.
but it says along with the child.
Exactly. So this translation is being a little bit coy. It's trying to rework the Hebrew to make some things work out. But I did a deep dive on this a while back. Maybe I'll release just a single video on this on my channel to dive into it. But when you're reading the Hebrew text, it seems very clear that it is actually the child that was placed on her shoulders, not anything else. Plus, you don't put bread or water on your shoulders. It's
Maybe
not a
if we have
thing that you
a fancy shoulder carrying thing.
right. But so she had one skin of water and how much bread? I don't know, a loaf, two loaves. We're not really sure. And then they departed into the wilderness. And then what happens? It seems like there's one skin. It says water in the skin was gone. And then she cast, or in the original text in Hebrew, it reads more closely to like she placed or she set or she sent, the child under the bush. So this would be indicative of a small child. You would be protecting your
Oh,
small
yeah.
child from the heat of the sun, not a 14-year-old boy in the desert. Like technically
Mhm.
a 14-year-old boy this time is like practically a man.
Right.
So but So this is a really weird wording, and it seems like they're trying to avoid admitting that Isaac or that Ishmael is a little baby or a little child, but it clearly reads that Isaac. I keep calling him Isaac. That Ishmael is a little child here, which is why he's on her shoulders. And then when they run out of water and food, he gets placed under a bush. And then even more, if he's a full grown 14-year-old boy, guess what? They need more than a loaf of bread and one skin of water. If you have a little baby, you can, 3-year-old, you
Right.
can get along for a while in the desert with one skin of water and a loaf of bread.
Oh my god.
So like
Like,
everything in the story seems like it's a baby. It's a
oh
little toddler.
yeah. I absolutely thought like what I was picturing in my mind as I was reading this story, definitely a very small child.
Right.
But also, Abraham's being such an asshole. Like,
Yeah.
why of all the times for Abraham to trust God, he trusts God when someone else's health is at stake. But he doesn't
Mhm.
trust God when his own health is at stake. And he's worried someone's going to kill him. He'll put Sarah in danger. But now I guess he's trusting God will take care of Hagar because it's not his own skin on the line.
Yeah. And so it's always easier to trust God with somebody else's provision rather than your own. And look at what the richest man in the desert did. The richest man in this region, he decided to send his firstborn son and this poor young woman into a slave woman, mind you, with no money, with almost no provisions. He basically sent her out there to die.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Like, what?
There's no way
I,
around
it,
it.
ugh. And then
Now,
why would he send her out there to die when God just told him that no, you're going to have a whole other lineage is going to be through Ishmael?
right, right, yeah. It's the whole narrative is silly to me. Um, I did grab a copy of the Net Bible with full notes, and the Net Bible tries to make sense of what's going on her shoulders as well. And
Okay.
it says early in the morning, Abraham took some food. Interesting. Some food is probably fine. And it says, and a skin of water, and gave them to Hagar, and he put them on her shoulders, uh, gave her the child, and sent her away. Which again is them massaging the text. It doesn't say put them. It's not a
Huh.
plural in the original text. Like people keep translators keep reading this trying to make sense of what in the world was placed on the shoulders because it's not entirely clear, but I think it makes the most sense that it was Isaac. Or I'm going to do this 100 times before we're done. Ishmael.
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm less upset about the age and I'm much
Oh,
more
right.
upset about Abraham being horrible.
Right.
That's what? Ugh. So I mean, and God's like, no, no, it's gonna be cool. And like again, an all-knowing God, I guess, knew that Abraham was gonna do this. And like that this poor woman, she's like, I'm so overwhelmed with grief. I can't watch my son die and I can't
Yeah.
save him. Like, I cannot imagine anything worse, honestly.
So that's such a good point because the apologists are going to be like, well, it's okay that Abraham did it this way because God ensured that they would be taken care of and they would be made great. But like, this is not a great look because they were both on the edge of death before God decided
Mhm.
to step in. So to me, it sounds like bad planning. Like if God theoretically is going to be there the whole time taking care of them, he shouldn't have caused them to be on the edge of death in the middle of the desert because even though guess what, they didn't die. Oh, why cause the suffering? What good is the suffering doing for you?
Yeah, it's this common theme of downplaying people's suffering, downplaying how traumatizing this would be to go through. Like
Yeah.
any I would say any parent, but even any person who loves a child, like watching them die and not being able to save them, like, I can't imagine anything worse, and they
Nothing.
didn't have to go through that, right? Like, then it says, "Then God heard the boys' cries, and the angel of God said to Hagar from the sky, 'Hagar, what's wrong?'" What do
What?
you mean, "What's wrong?" Are
Yeah. Could you imagine?
you kidding me?
It's crazy. What's
What's
wrong? You know what's
wrong?
wrong.
Oh my God, what's wrong? And then, "Oh, don't be afraid. Now God's hurt him, so we'll go comfort him. It'll be okay."
Yeah.
And this is like such a common theme I hear in modern Christianity, this sort of like God harms people so that he can save the people and then get credit for saving them when he was
Right.
the one who put them in harm's way in the first place.
Because God could have said, go back and, don't cast your child off to the desert, bring her back into your home and treat her well. Don't let Sarah mistreat the child and the mother. Don't do that. That's bad. He didn't do that. He said, no, just send them out in the desert. Be
It's
fine.
fine.
I'll figure it out. Don't worry.
Right? Or how about you send her out towards another city with money and camels and whatever
Mhm.
other provisions she send a whole group with her. Nope.
Yeah,
Desert
exactly. Yeah. They could have
solo.
said, listen, travel to Egypt with her, and reunite her with her family. Because remember, they told us 100 times that Hagar's Egyptian. You already know how to get to Egypt. You were just there. Travel to Egypt, find her family, and return her. You know what I mean? Like, why send her out
Mhm.
into the desert? Like, none of the story makes a whole lot of sense. And to your point, about the child suffering, like, man, there's nothing I hate more than to see a child suffer and cry. To me, it's beyond belief that there could be or would be a God that is a good father that is not like mortified every time a child needlessly suffers. I can't make sense
Mhm.
of it.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't
Yeah.
no good human would do that.
Like when my son could stub his toe and I go into a panic. Like I just, you know what I mean? Like it's beyond me that you would be okay with a child on the edge of starvation and dehydration in the desert and show up like, "Hey, what's going on out here?"
Yeah. What do you mean, "What's wrong?" Oh my god.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so God says it'll be fine. It says, "Then God opened Hagar's eyes and she saw a well." Does that mean
Right.
like he made a well appear?
So there's been a lot of debate on this because like the phrase that gets used is used to refer to like being made aware of something.
Okay.
It doesn't always get rendered literally like being made physically to see something. It's like when it says that Adam knew his wife Eve. We understand what that means, right?
Oh, okay.
They didn't play Would You Rather. That's not what happened. So like it seems like you can take this phrase idiomatically to mean like God just like made her aware of the well that was nearby that she didn't know about. She hadn't found it yet. Which is ironic, is kind of a good segue into the next part of the chapter, which is they're in the land of Beersheba, famously the land of seven wells. And
Oh.
so there's a lot of wells over there.
Oh, jeez.
um, so that's kind of how I'm reading it. But if God is going to step in and like open her eyes to the fact that there's a well nearby, why wait to the edge of death? Why? What are you
Right?
doing?
Good
Just
lord.
give her the information she needs from the outset.
Yeah.
It's like if I took a child in and be like, listen, don't worry, you're off the street now. I'm going to feed you. But then I didn't feed them for like 3 days till they were like on the edge of death. You'd be like, first of all, I'm calling CPS and take this child away from you. Second of all, that's crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is crazy.
Mm.
So, okay, he gets water, which is nice, great. And then now I guess God is with the boy. So it says, verse 20, and God was with the boy as he grew up in the wilderness of Paran. He became an expert archer, and his mother arranged a marriage for him with a young woman from Egypt. So, no harm, no foul. It's fine. No big deal. Ugh,
It all turned out
still,
okay. It's all right.
still mad about it.
If we learned anything from Christian apologists, it's that suffering is irrelevant as long as it turns out well. Like all's well that ends well. Um, which I the only way I could take that then is to mean that Jesus' suffering wasn't all that worthwhile. If
Yeah,
suffering doesn't matter.
Jesus' suffering it was the biggest sacrifice that any human being could ever possibly go through. Get it right, Justin.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah, yeah. I keep forgetting that I got to put my special pleading hat on. All suffering is meaningless except when it's your savior. His suffering means everything.
You need a special pleading hat. Let's get you a hat that says special pleading.
I did recently get a chef's hat to wear. But no
That looks
special pleading
ridiculous.
hat. I'll get a special pleading hat.
Okay, good.
Oh
But
boy.
you're right. I with Christian apologists, man, every time I talk to somebody about Job, I get upset. And it's this, I mean, I'm gonna have a hard time when we get to the book of Job, but like I'm gonna be doing some skipping because I don't ugh. But yeah, like the suffering suddenly when we suffer, it's good and God is teaching us things. And it doesn't matter how much you suffer as long as it turns out okay. I agree.
Yeah. That's kind of that's the moral of the story. The other moral is to whatever you do, don't question God. Okay, well, sure.
Yeah, I fail at that.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that. Not so much. Okay, we're almost through a second chapter. We're at about an hour, so we'll get through this last little bit.
There's
Oh
not
wow,
much
man.
to note in the remainder of the
Okay.
chapter. Abraham and Abimelech make a covenant.
Of
Um,
course they do.
obviously there's gonna be covenants.
So many covenants.
But like it never really comes up. Like no one cares. Like the rest of the Bible pretends like this event didn't really happen. No one cares about the oath after this.
Okay. Well, then, to our dear listeners, we are ending chapter 21. We have gotten through 2 chapters in this episode. Who knows? Maybe next time we'll get through 3. It'll be wild. I don't know.
There is one thing we should make just a mental note of for later,
Mhm.
which is in the land of Beersheba. The only notable thing he really did, it says Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there
Okay.
called on the name of Yahweh, the everlasting God. Um, keep it in the back of your mind all the times Yahweh gets associated with trees.
Oh,
This is a lot.
okay. Foreshadowing. Got it. Symbolism.
Yeah, and
I'm back to like English lit.
that's right. Where did Yahweh show up in Genesis 18 when he visited Abraham?
I already don't remember.
Under a tree, oak tree, if I remember correctly.
Oak tree. Oh, yeah, it sure was. It was an oak tree.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a keen association between like divine presence in trees that gets carried out all throughout the Hebrew scriptures, and I think a lot of people
Hmm.
miss it. But trees they're not just woodland objects in the ancient world. Trees had a form of divine mystique about them.
Mm. I can get that. Like, um, if you've ever, I know you have, like, been in the forests in the Pacific Northwest, like, when you go and that is it feels like it's, Jurassic Park or Fairyland or, when you're in the what's oh, people are gonna remember the land of the
Like the
elves.
Enchanted Forest?
You don't know. You don't know the Lord of the Rings, but in the Lord of the Rings where the elves live.
I don't know.
My
Uh,
dad is gonna be rolling his eyes that
the
I don't know
Shire?
this. No, that's where the
Oh.
hobbits lived.
Oh, I don't know these things. I don't know. This is my best guess.
If I texted my dad right now, he would immediately, we should test it. Wait, let's see.
Fern Gully.
No,
Oh,
don't be ridiculous. Fern Gully. That movie, like, traumatized me as a kid.
yeah. You cannot convince me that Avatar isn't a ripoff of Fern Gully. You can't do it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay, so I'm texting my dad right now. I have done this before where I will ask him, like, as part of a conversation, like, I need some trivia about the Lord of the Rings. He never asks why. He never asks follow-up questions. He just gives me the answer and then we move on with our day.
Oh, nice. Okay, then.
Oh, he isn't reading it. Well, I don't want to keep everyone I'll have to come on, Dad, reach. Oh, wait, he read it. Hang on.
It's incoming.
I know. It's my favorite. I love that he never asks for clarification or like he doesn't need to know why I was talking about elves. It's fine.
I mean, the movies were good. I'll give them some credit. The movies were definitely good.
Oh my gosh. Wait, he's giving me a detailed answer. He said two places, literal. Hang on. He is exactly like you with the Lord of the Rings, the way you are with the Old Testament.
Oh, no. Oh, no. This is going to be deep, way deeper than we.
Lothlorien. Okay, Lothlorien is the main place, but apparently there's Littoral, which is a second place. So
Okay.
there you go. Thanks, Dad.
W Dad.
There's this whole other, like he's read all the books, and there's like an appendix book and like a background book and books of maps, and I mean and there's a language. It's a whole thing.
Oh, no. He's got like the behind the scenes thing and.
He doesn't. I mean, he loves the movies, but like the books are the real deal. Oh,
Okay.
and Rivendell. That was the one I was thinking of.
So there's 3 of them.
Rivendell. Oh, wait. This first one, I think maybe I didn't recognize that word, so maybe that was a um autocorrect. Lothlorien and Rivendell. Ugh,
Mm,
that was the one I was trying to think of. Rivendell.
makes
Lothlorien, though.
sense.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just gonna say thanks, and he's never gonna ask me about it again.
So probably for the best.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
Oh, boy.
All right.
Oh.
I guess we should probably end it. So if anyone actually made it all the way to the end through my dad lore, thanks. But thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. And until next time.